There were a lot of quarterbacks drafted in the first round of the 2024 NFL Draft, 6 to be exact. I'd say there were really 4 names that we all expected to be first-round picks: Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, and JJ McCarthy. We all knew that they would go off the board day 1. There was a chance that maybe another guy could sneak up there into the first round, but we could have never guessed the run on quarterbacks that would go on to happen. Of course, the Falcons shocked the world by taking a 24-year-old Michael Penix 8th overall, but then there was another bit of a surprise: Bo Nix, who the Broncos ended up taking 12th overall. You gotta imagine that Sean Payton likes Nix a lot, which, makes sense. He has a lot of those same tendencies that Drew Brees had. So in Payton's eyes, it was worth taking a shot on him. And now the Denver quarterback room is really, really interesting. I'd be willing to bet that at some point we see Bo Nix start this season, and maybe that's even in week 1. Jarrett Stidham is still a Bronco, but at this point in his career, I feel like we kinda know what he is. He got a few starts to end last season when Russell Wilson got benched, and he was okay at best. As a Patriots fan, I've watched Stidham's career since the Patriots drafted him back in 2019, and he never really looked like he could be a starter there. Now, I really do like Stidham, but I'd also be lying if I said that I saw him as anything more than a backup at this point. It's really hard to imagine that Stidham is going to have some huge career pop going into year 5, but he is solid, and he's definitely more than capable of being the week 1 starter if Nix isn't ready. With all that being said, he does probably still have the lowest ceiling right now in the room. Obviously, there's Nix, who is going to be the main guy to talk about, but that's not all. Don't go counting out Zach Wilson. I'm mostly kidding here, but he's definitely an interesting name with a lot of past starting experience, even if it didn't go too well. Denver did end up actually trading for him, even if it was just for a late pick swap, but he was a 2nd overall pick for a reason, and maybe Sean Payton could help him develop a bit, and we can finally see just what he can become. Unless he completely sucks, which is definitely possible, you could even argue him against Stidham. There may be arguments for both Stidham and Wilson, but obviously the hope is that Nix is going to be the guy, which is why they took him with such a high pick. It really is the Drew Brees playstyle, where he may not be the most talented, but if he can hit his throws and dink and dunk well, he could be the right guy in a Sean Payton system. Payton has really struggled post Brees retirement, and maybe he's just looking to try to recreate Brees. As for the preseason goes, we already got to see what the Broncos look like a bit. Stidham was the first one to come out, and it wasn't anything too flashy, and he did technically throw a pick, even though he shouldn't have. You could probably blame this one on Samaje Perine. It really wasn't that pretty to watch, but it's kind of hard to blame Stidham there. Past him, though, we didn't have to wait too long to see the first pro touchdown for Bo Nix, who is already getting some confidence built out there. Down the red zone, he faked off a handoff to Audric Estime and then hit Marvin Mims on a little flat route. Hopefully that's a sign to come of what we'll see a few times once the regular season comes around. Estime did score later too, which was pretty cool to see. You might recognize his name. Estime was a beast at Notre Dame last season, and before that, he was the backup to Kyron Williams there. He ended up going in the 5th round, and right now it's pretty hard to say how much playtime he'll actually get, with him buried on the depth chart and Javonte Williams being the clear-cut number 1. Overall, it was a solid first showing for the Broncos, and more importantly, Nix looked good. He ended up finishing 15 of 21 for 125 yards and a touchdown. He also went on to rush 3 times for 17 yards. He definitely got more playing time than some of the other first-round quarterback picks, so at this point, it is a little bit easier to evaluate him. I do think that Bo Nix is a good quarterback. I thought that he was really fun to watch in college, where it felt like he was going to stay forever, and it's cool to now see him get his shot in the NFL. Things were definitely rocky there at Auburn for a minute, but it feels like everything has worked out for the best, and clearly, Oregon made just a huge difference for him in his career. The age thing does definitely complicate him as a prospect though. He's 2 months older than me and is only going into his rookie season. That was a big talking point on him at the draft, and that's completely fair. It's definitely better to take a guy like Drake May, who only played 3 years in college and then declared. But if the talent's there, the talent's there, and age doesn't really matter at that point. Now, it certainly helps in his benefit that he already has a ton of experience and plenty of tape in college, and because of that, I don't feel like I have to guess about what type of player he is. He's a good athlete that can extend plays when he really needs to, and he's a really accurate passer and can be consistent. I really do like Nix as a quarterback, but of course, he is still a rookie. He'll still have his growing pains, and the simple truth is, he isn't in as friendly of a system as he was at Oregon. But so far, Nix does look good. and that's all you can really ask for. As with any rookie or young quarterback, so much of their future is completely dependent on the situation around him. When you look at head coach for the Broncos, I think you feel pretty good. Sean Payton did a lot for Drew Brees, and it certainly helps that he's an experienced Super Bowl winning head coach. That's definitely a big plus. But as for the offense around him, it kind of depends. Denver did trade away Jerry Jeudy, but Courtland Sutton is still there, and he's had his great moments in the league, but he's a bit of a complex player to evaluate at this point in his career. Sure, he can be a number one, but you'd definitely like to see someone else ahead of him. The Broncos just don't have that luxury. Josh Reynolds is now there, and he was good for the Lions last season, but it's definitely a big difference going from Amon-Ra St. Brown to Courtland Sutton when it comes to taking the defense's focus away. Not to mention that Jared Goff was also really good last year, which certainly helped his numbers. There are definitely some interesting guys to watch at wide receiver though. There's some buzz around Marvin Mims, and he had an okay rookie season, but the Broncos surely want him to make a jump. And who knows, maybe at some point he could overtake Courtland Sutton. But in the meantime, he should at least be the 2 over Reynolds. Tim Patrick is also still on the roster, and that's a guy that you really just have to feel for. He had back-to-back seasons with over 700 yards and hasn't played since. He tore his ACL in 2022, and last season, it was his Achilles. It really is just brutal, and it's hard to say if he'll actually end up bouncing back. Finally, another really interesting name to watch, especially when or if Nix is starting, Troy Franklin. We've seen plenty of times when a team has tried to pair a quarterback with their old college wide receiver. The Cardinals did it with Hollywood Brown and Kyler Murray. There were a couple of Alabama pairs that did it, Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith, and Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Waddle. But really the one that started the trend was Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. That definitely worked out, and they literally got to a Super Bowl because of it. So ever since, teams have tried to replicate it. It's going to be interesting to see how tight end looks with Adam Trautman and Greg Dulcich again, but a big question is definitely the offensive line. The Broncos tried to fix the line really fast last offseason, and it actually kind of worked surprisingly. Denver handed out 2 bags to Mike McGlinchey and Ben Powers. McGlinchey went on to play well and will play again at right tackle with Garrett Bowles still there at left tackle. As for Powers, he was fine, but he definitely wasn't as good as everyone expected him to be last season. But I do think ultimately it helps that Quinn Miners is just a dog and fantastic at right guard. Center is going to be the big question mark though. Lloyd Cushenberry is gone. So will it be Luke Wattenberg, or is it going to be Alex Forsyth? As of now, it does sound like it's going to be Wattenberg, but I think it'd make Bo Nix's life a bit easier if his center was also a guy that he played with at Oregon like Forsyth. There are still a ton of questions when it comes to the Broncos, and that really makes them an interesting team. But at the end of the day, it's all about Bo Nix. Who knows if he'll actually get to start week 1 or not, but he will start at some point, and Sean Payton really needs him to be the guy.